Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're about to tackle a concept that's literally going to change how we view our time, our effort, and our brain power. We're completely rethinking how our intellectual output is valued in the modern age. Think about it. For decades, we've operated on this super simple equation, right? You do the work, you get paid for the work, and boom, the transaction is over. But did you know that everyday internet users generate quintillions of bytes of data for free every single day? The source material we're digging into today suggests that in our highly connected, data-driven world, that old equation, it's fundamentally broken. We're shifting from this era of temporary labor to one where your insights have a permanent lifespan.
So I want you to really put yourself in this scenario. Imagine you're a creator, maybe a researcher or a data annotator. You spend hours perfectly categorizing some complex data set, or you write a brilliant piece of code, or you provide this incredible, unique insight. You hit submit, you get your flat fee, all done, right? Well, not exactly. Your intellectual contribution goes on to be used, reused, and built upon for months or even years after you walked away. The company using your work, they're still extracting value from it every single day. So what happens when your work outlives your paycheck? It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1, the value of knowledge, and specifically how micro-actions have a macro impact. To really wrap our heads around this shift, we got to look closely at the tiny, seemingly isolated actions that secretly drive modern algorithms. We usually think of value as this big, finished product, but check out this first example straight from our source. A verified annotation today could still help train models years later. Let's just pause and think about the reality of that for a second. You verify an image, you tag some text, or confirm a data point today. Takes you, a few seconds? But that single verified annotation gets baked right into the foundational layer of a machine learning model. Long after you've totally forgotten about it, that tiny piece of knowledge survives. It becomes part of the architecture. It's providing ongoing structural value to systems far into the future. It doesn't degrade, it becomes foundational.
Building on that rhythm, look at this second example. A correction made once could improve thousands of future outputs. We are talking about a massive compounding scale here. You catch an error, you fix a flawed assumption in a dataset. That action happens exactly once in real time. But the ripple effect? Oh, it's astronomical. Because you made that single correction, every future output that model generates, hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of outputs, is now slightly more accurate, slightly more valuable. The scale of your one-time effort literally compounds endlessly.
And rounding out this trio, we have this absolutely powerful statement. A specialized insight could continue creating value long after submission. This fundamentally breaks all the rules of temporary work. When you provide specialized knowledge, something born from your own unique expertise, it isn't a consumable good. It doesn't just get used up. Once that insight is digitized and integrated into a broader system, it acts like a perpetual engine. Honestly, it's basically the employee of the month that never sleeps, never asks for a raise, and never steals your lunch from the break room fridge. It just keeps running, continuously creating value, totally divorced from the moment you initially submitted it.
Let's move to our next section and see how this builds into our next major concept, labor versus capital, and redefining our intellectual output.
So if those microactions we just talked about are perpetually generating value, we've got a serious categorization problem on our hands. Like, what do we actually call this? To visualize the issue, let's walk through this timeline. Look at point 1, submission. In a traditional sense, this is where the work is officially considered done. You handed over the data? Great. Now look at point 2, months pass, and then point 3, years later. The models are still actively training and functioning based on what you provided all the way back at point 1. The proof is right here. The knowledge generated doesn't just stop at point 1. It travels across this entire timeline, creating immense value long after your initial human effort stopped.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core argument of our source text. On the left side, we have knowledge as labor. Traditionally, labor is an exchange of time for money, and the transaction stops right upon submission. You paint a house, you get paid, the labor is done. But look at the right side. Knowledge is capital. Capital is an asset. It's something you invest that continues to yield returns, continuously creating value over a sustained period. The text argues that modern intellectual output stops looking like traditional labor and starts looking identically like capital.
This brings us to Section 3, the Codatta shift, exploring a whole new framework for knowledge.
Now, when a fundamental shift like this happens, the underlying infrastructure has to change right along with it. According to the source material, this is exactly where a project called Codatta comes into play. The text specifically notes that Codatta is building around that shift. To be completely clear and impartial here, we're simply looking at how this specific organization is choosing to address the exact paradigm shift we've been outlining. They're basically attempting to create a structural system that treats intellectual output with the longevity and respect that true capital demands.
Now, what's really interesting about this new framework is how it breaks down the exact pillars. How do you actually turn a one-off task into an ongoing asset? Well, the text outlines 3 strict requirements. First, it must be ownable. It can't just vanish into some corporate void. The creator retains a stake. Second, it must be traceable. You have to be able to track that specific piece of knowledge as it moves through the system. And third, it must be connected to outcomes over time. These 3 pillars, they're the blueprint for transforming knowledge from simple labor into real capital.
I really want to deep dive into that final point, because it's honestly the anchor of this entire explainer, connected to outcomes over time. This is the core principle that knowledge continues generating value long after the initial work is done. Connect this right back to the timeline and the compounding examples of annotations and corrections we discussed a few minutes ago. Think about it. If your work is traceable and ownable, then when it generates an outcome 3 years down the line, you are still connected to that success. Your capital has officially yielded a return.
So, the crucial point is this. Let's move to our final section, beyond one-time payments, and what creators actually deserve.
We've talked about the algorithms, the timelines, the frameworks, but we really have to bring the focus back to the human element here, the actual people generating this incredibly valuable knowledge capital day in and day out. The source text builds to a very specific, powerful conclusion, the complete inadequacy of the one-time payment. If your knowledge is acting as capital, if it's literally a perpetual engine of value, then a flat, one-time payment is entirely inadequate. The old compensation model completely fails to match the perpetual utility of the knowledge you provide. It's like selling a highly profitable factory for the price of a single brick. It just doesn't align with reality anymore.
Which leaves us with this final, profound thought to ponder. If your knowledge continues generating value after the work is done, what do you truly deserve? If we are genuinely moving from an economy of knowledge labor to an economy of knowledge capital, the answer to that question changes absolutely everything about how we work, how we are compensated, and ultimately, how we value our own minds. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll leave you to think on that.